And slowly, slowly, we can see people arriving in the room, in the participants box. Hi, everybody. Good evening to you all. Thank you ever so much for joining us on your Friday evening for this exclusive webinar for Georgian teachers from National Geographic Learning and from our partners at English Book Education. We're just going to wait a few moments to allow everyone to arrive into the room. So while we're waiting, please let us know in the chat box which city you are from in Georgia. So this is an exclusive Georgian webinar, so you're all Georgian. So let me know which city, which area you are from, and I'll try and call out some names. Okay, hi Tiona from Tbilisi. There we go, going really quick. Hi, hello, hello. Tinatin from Batumi. Kutaisi, lots of people from Kutaisi. Is that good pronunciation, Nene?
Yeah, it's correct.
Oh,
Kutaisi,
nice.
yeah.
Perfect. Okay, lots from Tbilisi, of course, from Poti, oh, I can't pronounce that. Dmanisi.
Yeah, Dmanisi.
Good.
Yep.
Hi, Leila from Karaguli.
So
I'm
it's
good at this, right?
Like... Karaguli is pronounced like this in Georgian.
Okay. Hi, Nina from Gori. Hello, hello, hello. The numbers are still going up, so we're just going to wait another couple of minutes just to let everyone into the room. We'll keep doing some shout outs from the chat box. And actually, what I should say, when you are using the chat box, please make sure that you are sending your message to everyone rather than just the panelists and the hosts, because that way only me, myself and Nene see the messages. So make sure in the chat, click on everyone. And also a couple of you are using the Q&A box, which is great for questions, but not for the chat. So please just use the Q&A box for specific questions as opposed to general chat. Okay, Nene, I'm going to hand over to you to do some introductions.
I have a few words in Georgian and then I will move to English. მოგესალმებით ყველას. პირველ რიგში ძალიან დიდი მადლობა მინდა გადაგიხადოთ იმისათვის, რომ დარეგისტრირდით აღნიშნულ კონფერენციაზე, რომელიც შეეხება კითხვით უნარის განვითარებას და ძალიან გვახარებს თქვენი ასეთი აქტიურობა და ჩართულობა. ასევე ძალიან დიდი მადლობა მინდა გადაუხადო ალექს, რომელიც დღეს არის ჩვენთან ერთად და სპეციალურად ქართველი მასწავლებლობისთვის ექსკლუზიურად ატარებს ტრეინინგს. გადავერთვებით უშელება ინგლისურზე. Hello everybody. I would like to thank you to all of you for just registering and joining us today. And thank you, Alex, of course, for giving us a chance to attend your training session today, which will be held exclusively for Georgian teachers. I hope and I'm sure that you will enjoy this today's session and you will find out interesting, informative and useful. And also you will find out the new ways and new methods how to teach written effectively. So good luck and thank you. Alex, I think that we can start. Thank you so much.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Nene, for the introductions. And again, thank you to all of you guys for joining us today. Just want to make sure I am clicked on the right screen. You can all see my screen okay. I think that's good. And then we do that and we're good to go. So yeah, we are here today to talk all about delivering effective reading lessons to our students. And we're going to do sort of a few things within the session. We're going to look at some theory, we're going to look at some structures, and of course, I'm going to give you lots and lots of teaching tips, ideas to use in your classes with your students. I should give a word of warning though. As you know, for anybody who has attended my webinars before, they are quite interactive. So we will be using the chat box a lot. We might be using some of the reaction buttons and we will be doing a couple of polls as well. Okay, so I want to start with a question actually. I just want to get a feel of how your students feel about reading lessons. So this is the question I would like you to answer. I'm going to answer it as a poll, okay? So here's the question. So generally speaking, how do your students feel about reading lessons? Do they love them? Do they say, oh, they're okay? Do they think they're boring? Or do they go, oh, really? Do we have to do reading? So let me know in the poll, or if you want to do it in the chat box, that's okay. I'll give you another 15 seconds to vote. Yeah, I mean, it's a mixed picture coming through here, and that's understandable because, of course, every student is different, which is why I guess they're generally speaking how they feel about reading lessons. And I think, you know, from my experience, there's that mixed experience as well, because some students enjoy that time in class where they get to kind of work by themselves. It's more intrapersonal than interpersonal. But equally, the teacher in me says, well, surely reading is something that they can do at home by themselves. And sitting in silence, reading a text is actually not a waste of class time, but surely I could be doing something more productive with my time in class where they are interacting. So a lot of what we're going to be looking at today, we'll be looking at how we can make reading lessons more interactive, where students are working together, there's more communication going on. In other words, there's less quiet time, less downtime in the lesson. And I'm just sharing the results there with you. So 31% said they love them, 59% say they're okay, 6% boring, 3% really do we have to do them? Okay. I should just share those with you as well. So I think we have to then consider why. You know, why do students maybe sometimes think that reading lessons can be a bit boring? Why may they not be as interesting or as interactive or as fun as they might want them to be? So I'm just going to start off with a very simple exercise here. I think one reason students can find reading lessons boring or not so interesting is because of the content. And I'm not saying every student is the same, but they need to have content that's going to interest them, that's going to be relevant to them, that's going to get them actually curious about what they are reading. In other words, we need to use texts which reflect the real world. So I'm going to show you some reading lessons taken from some different National Geographic Learning courses. And just as you're looking at them, I know you're not going to read them, but you can look at the pictures, you can look at the titles, and I want you to think about how you feel looking at these lessons, okay? Don't write anything until I ask you to, okay, though? So how do these reading lessons make you feel? What kind of emotions are you feeling? Looking at these pictures, looking at these stories. Perspectives, the one before were from Reading Explorer and Voices. So like I say, look at the titles, look at the images. How do you feel having seen all those articles? Tell me in the chat box, what words, what adjectives can describe your emotions of those particular lessons? Okay, you feel interested. Thank you, Taya. What else do you feel? You feel involved, you feel curious. Thank you, Natia, interesting. Nino feels curious, interesting, engaging. Thank you, Natia. Informative, interesting. Okay, exactly. Or you feel interested, you feel curious, you feel engaged. You feel eager to read. Thank you, Nino. Exactly. And those are all things that we want students to feel. We want them to feel motivated to read, even excited. Certainly, we want them to feel a little bit inquisitive, engaged. And for sure, we want them to feel curious when it comes to reading lessons. So we can achieve this by picking content that is real world, that reflects the world that they live in. And I think this quite really sums it up for me. Real world content and culture is a very powerful hook. It can heighten the interest and motivation of your students. In the prism of culture, language classes instantly become exciting educational experiences. Tell me in the chat box or put your hand up. Do you want your classrooms to be exciting educational experiences? Put your hands up or say, tell me in the chat box. Okay, lots of hands going up. Lots of people saying, sure, yeah, absolutely, yes. I can hear you shouting at your screens. Yes, 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 of course, this is what we want for our classes. So if we want to motivate, if we want to engage our learners in our reading lessons, we have to choose our content wisely, carefully. It's going to grab their attention, their focus as much as possible. But it's not just a case of having the right kind of text. More importantly, or maybe not more importantly, but just as importantly, is how we exploit it, how we use it, how we structure our lessons to ensure that our students are involved at all stages of the lesson. And how can we make it as interactive, as collaborative, as communicative as possible? So we're going to look at the basic structure of an intensive reading lesson. And as I'm sure you all know, there are 3 stages to an intensive reading lesson. We have the pre-reading, we have the while reading, and we have the post or the after reading type activities. So like I say, we're going to look at some activities for each of these stages, which can help to involve your learners more. And certainly I would not do all of these in one lesson. It's just a variety of ideas that you could try when you go back into the classroom next week. And I think, when we think about pre-reading, we think about activating prior knowledge. And there's a lot of research that tells us that pre-reading activities are super, super important because they help to increase comprehension, they help to increase motivation, and they help to make connections between the learner and the text they are reading. Because reading is a two-way street. It's gaining information from a text, but it's also bringing your own knowledge, your own experiences to the text to make comprehension. So we talk about that as a top-down reading skill. So this idea of schema, relevant background knowledge, prior knowledge, or just plain experience. When students make connections to the text that they are reading, their comprehension increases. So the fundamental tenet of this schema means that a written text does not carry meaning by itself. Rather, a text only provides directions for readers as to how they should retrieve or construct the meaning from their own existing knowledge. So that whole background knowledge. But research also tells us that there are 3 different areas of schemata that we can help our students to access pre-reading. So we have content schemata. Now, content schemata is the one that we all do all the time when it comes to reading. It's literally about that background knowledge, the content area, the topic familiarity. So here we have a reading all about powering the planet, and it's asking students, well, what do you know essentially about energy and how we power the planet? So I don't talk too much about that. So that's something that we do all the time. Something that we do less often is to activate their formal schemata. And by this, I mean the organizational forms, any rhetorical structures. So if we tell our students they're going to read an academic text about different types of power, in this case we can see solar and wind power, how might it be organized? What kind of grammar might be used within it? Clearly, it's not just going to be an opinion piece. There's certain organizational features which different text types have. So it's a case of activating that schemata too. because that will help them to understand the structure of the text and therefore make it easier for them to comprehend. And then we have also the linguistic schemata. And by this, we mean the language proficiency in the vocabulary and the grammar. Activating specific vocabulary that might exist in this text. So, we're going to read a text about Playing the Planet. What words would you expect to come out from that? So energy, nuclear, wind, solar, etc. So we have to activate that linguistic schemata as well as the grammatical schemata as well. It's more academic text, there's more likely to be passive forms within it. So it's just preparing them on all levels of what to expect. Now, before I give you some of my own ideas of how we can activate schemata, I want to ask a question to you. What pre-reading routines do you already use? Let me know in the chat box. What pre-reading routines do you already use? What are your go-to activities before reading? Okay, lovely Mariam, brainstorming. But what kind of brainstorming are you doing? Just what they know about the topic or specific vocabulary? Okay, mind mapping, love a lot, good mind map, Lali. Venn diagram, thank you, Natia. Yeah, guessing or predicting, thank you, Nino. Predictions, asking questions, predictions, multiple choice, mind mapping. Awesome. Picture association, lovely. Yeah, Katuna, look at the picture. Interview the picture. Mind mapping, brainstorm. Okay, perfect. I'm just going to share some with you very quickly. And some of you will be familiar with, some maybe less so. This is one that I think most people do all of the time. Look at the title, look at the photo. What do you think the text will be about? It's that prediction type task. So here we got an article called A World of Cyborgs, and we have a picture of a man climbing a mountain or climbing a cliff face. So very basic, very simple. But I think it's important to push it further than that. What words do you think will appear in the text? So very explicit. It's not pre-teaching at this stage. It's asking, well, what words do you think might appear in an article about cyborgs? Maybe they talk about Terminator. I don't know. Whatever knowledge your students can share in terms of that. It might be robots, robotics, for example. And then read the text and check their predictions. Now, what I like about this is it gives them a purpose for reading. There isn't just a question in the course book. They've created their own reasons for reading, right? It is student generated, it's student focused. It creates purpose for them. Because that is what happens in real life. When we see an article, we look at the title, we might look at the picture, and we have ideas already forming in our head about what do I want to learn from this article. We're not going to answer comprehension questions. So why do that in the classroom? Bring in that real world task element as well. Okay, so that's one thing you do. The next one is an activity I like to call word splash. And this is, again, it's a prediction type task, but in a slightly different way. So how does it work, word splash? Very simple. I put a load of words on the board and I say, all of these words are taken from a text. What do you think the text will be about? So have a look at the words. We've got hungry, breaks, food, schools, leftover, billion. Tell me what you think the article is going to be about. Okay, lunch here, but give me some more details. It's not just about lunch or charity, it's something more than that. What links all of these words together? Okay, good, Mariam, maybe about homeless kids, maybe about poverty, maybe about school meals, but what specifically about school meals do you think, Ekaterina? Maybe it's about pollution, kindness and some tornado results, I'm not sure. Life in poor countries, maybe poverty, food. We're so close. But the point is, you're creating a picture already in your mind about what the text might be about. And at the same time, we've given them some key vocabulary. Now, right now, you're probably thinking, well, what is the text about? I want to know, right? So, and I'm sure you do, right? Do you tell me in the chat box, do you want to know what this text is about? Of course you do, because you've kind of been dangled a carrot in many ways, and you want to know what the text is actually about. So this is the text that those words were taken from. It's all about food waste at school canteens from around the world and ways in which we can reduce food waste. And this kind of activity helps with comprehension, but it also helps with reading fluency, because they want to know what the text is about. They're therefore more likely to read it at a faster rate and with higher levels of comprehension. And as a follow-up to that, I say, okay, now look, you had all those words. Can you find those words in the text? Read the text, underline the words, and see if your ideas were correct. It's giving them a reason for reading. Okay, that was another activity. Another activity you could do is called the 3 whys. And this is a really nice routine to get students making connections between the text and their world. So this is an article all about online identities, something which I'm sure many of your students can relate to, because is their online identity really true to themselves? Maybe yes, maybe no. So what are the 3 whys? The first why is this: why does this topic matter to me? What personal connections can I make? So in this case, we'd give them the title, give them this topic a bit. So why is it important to me? What connections can I make to my life? We then kind of broaden that idea to why might this topic matter to the people around me? For example, my family, my friends, my city, my nation. So again, making sort of broader connections. And then the third why is, why might this topic matter to the world in general, as a whole? It gets them to think about the topic on a deeper, more personal level. And I'm not saying that this activity would work with every reading, it won't, but you have to be selective with them, okay? So that's more of a thinking routine, I would say. But it is still communicative, because once students have thought about those questions, you put them into pairs, you put them into groups, they talk about them, they discuss them. Okay, another activity is called speed chatting. So this is a really simple activity where we give the students the title of the reading, or the topic of the reading. In this case, it's one all about art. And we get students standing up in the classroom in 2 lines. And those 2 lines are facing each other. Okay, so everyone's stood up, so it's a little bit kinesthetic, and they've all got one person to speak to directly opposite them. You then give them some questions based around the topic. For example, here, what kind of things do you consider as art? Tell me about your favorite type or your favorite piece of art. Would you say you're an artistic person, for example? And then you give them 60 seconds to talk to the person opposite them. And off they go, discussing those 3 questions, or 4 questions, up to you. After 6 seconds, you stop. You then move people down the line so they have a new partner, and they go again. And you might repeat that process maybe 3 or 4 times. So how does it work as a sort of a pre-reading task? It focuses them on the topic, because in their conversations, lots of different vocabulary is going to be coming up, different views, different opinions, and different students have different subject knowledge. So all the time they're listening to their partners, it's building that knowledge, building that understanding of the topic that they're about to read to. It's a warm-up. Just like you would do a warm-up before going for a run, this is exactly the same thing. It's preparing their brain for the content of the reading. And I've done this many times, and students love it because it's so, well, it's very noisy and rowdy, which they kind of enjoy. And it's just quite informal as well. You know, the teacher isn't there to check for grammar necessarily or particular vocabulary. It's just to get them thinking. Okay, so let's imagine that we're going to do this reading with our students, all about the world's favorite drug, which is caffeine. So imagine we're going to do a speed chatting activity with this. What questions could you set your students to discuss before doing the reading? Tell me in the chat box. What questions would you get your students to discuss? And I say that, you know, this is more than just putting them in pairs and talking. I think that can be quite passive sometimes. This way it's a little bit more interactive, more active. Okay, do you like fast food? Thank you, Miranda. Or what's your favorite? Yeah, do you like coffee? What's your favorite kind of coffee? How do you have your coffee? What types of addiction do you know? What makes you alert in the morning? What kind of coffee do you like? Thank you, Tamar and Megazde. Have you ever been addicted to something? What do you have for lunch? What is drugs for you? What makes you alert? How often do you drink? That's a great question. How often do you drink coffee? Why do people drink coffee? What food can't you live without? Okay. Why is coffee so addictive? Thank you, Anna. How much coffee do you drink in a day? Thank you, Mariam. There's lots of Mariams. I was aware of that before. Okay. And we have that conversation. I had these kind of questions. How much caffeine do you drink every day? How does caffeine make you feel? Why do you think people are addicted to caffeine? You can come up with your own questions, okay? You are creative teachers, but it just gets students interested. So speed chatting is another task. You can do pre-reading. Another pre-reading activity. This is, I have to say, this is my kind of go-to activity. If I'm not feeling overly inspired with my warmers, this is what I'll go back to. My favorite KWL chart, which I am sure you're all very familiar with, and with good reason, because it's such an effective tool. You know, what I know already, okay, is asking students specifically, what do you know about caffeine in this case? And they write down all the things that they know. What do you want to know? What questions do you have about caffeine use and what caffeine is, where it comes from? And the beauty of this part of the task is it's developing critical thinking. It's making them ask questions. And again, it gives them a purpose for reading beyond just answering questions in a course book. Like we said earlier, we read something because we want our own questions answered. And this puts that into reality. It makes them focused. I want to know how bad caffeine is for me, or is it really bad for me? I want to know how much caffeine is too much caffeine. And again, I can read through the text for my own purposes. That's not to say I'm not going to do the comprehension questions. Of course I am further on, but now I have a reason for myself. And then at the end of the lesson, we come back to the what I learned. Why are we doing all of these things? Well, as Jeremy Harmer says, the more that the students bring of themselves to the task of reading a text, the better, the easier it becomes for them. We want to facilitate that process, make it as easy, as accessible as possible for all students. And a lot of these activities, they are self-differentiating, especially the KWL, right? Students have their own purpose, own reasons for reading. And the stronger, the more adept readers will have different questions, different purposes for reading. That's okay, that's good. They can then share that with each other. Okay, the last pre-reading task I want to introduce you to is the good old anticipation guide. So anticipation guides, again, they just provide a reason for reading. And it's just a quiz. It's a true or false quiz that you do before you read. And we also ask you, is caffeine is good for us? Tea contains more caffeine than coffee. What do we think? Let's do this as a poll. So have a look here and try and answer the questions. So for each of these, do you think it is true or false? So let's see how many of you can answer the questions. So 60 of you voted so far. I need at least 200 of you to vote, okay? That would mean over half of you have voted in the poll, which would be amazing. Give another 10 seconds to vote. Thank you very much. The other 200 went to make some coffee. Okay, that's 150 of you answered. That's pretty good. I'm going to end the poll there. Now, of course, let's just check the answers first. So, number one, 68% think it's true, 30% false. Number two, pretty 50-50 actually. Interesting. Caffeine addicts often get headaches, 56-44. Caffeine increases brain activity. Okay, 87% say yes. Okay, interesting. Now, having done that, do you want to know the answers? Of course you do. But I'm not going to tell you the answers as a teacher because I want you to find the answers for yourself. I have provided you a very realistic reason to read the text as quickly, as fluently as possible. And in doing so, you're going to practice your scanning skills, your skimming skills, right? But of course, we haven't got time to read the text, so I will tell you the answers. So yes, number one is true, but not always good for us. Number two is false. It's a common misconception, although of course it does depend on the type of coffee that you are drinking. Caffeine addicts often get headaches is true. My wife is a perfect example of this. If she doesn't have her morning coffee, she gets a headache. And caffeine increases brain activity. Yeah, 87% of you are correct. It is true. Okay, so anticipation guides are great because students like quizzes and seeing if they're right, and B, it gets them reading more fluently. And we can kind of put that into this whole kind of idea of prediction type tasks. So with this particular lesson from Reading Explorer, it's kind of like anticipation guide where I'm going to zoom in here actually for you. There we go. Where you have to match the different types of food or drink and how much caffeine they have within them. So how many milligrams. So we can see there that pain relief medicine has around 125 milligrams of caffeine. An espresso coffee has not that much caffeine actually, only 25 milligrams, but it's quite small. What do we think H is? Tell me in the chat. What do we think H is? What has more caffeine than anything else? Nearly 300 milligrams in. Any guesses? Is it the chocolate, the tea, the kind of energy drink, coffee, Coke, soda? Okay. Lots of people saying Coke. Black tea, no idea, says Miranda. Okay. That's fine. What about G? What do we think G might be? 200 milligrams. That's a lot of caffeine. maybe the Coke again, coffee, tea. So you get your students to do this, try to predict, try to guess, and then you get them to read the text. See if their predictions, their anticipated answers are correct or not. Again, it's a reason for reading. I'm just going to show the answers to you very quickly. So I should zoom in that way. So the milk chocolate bar was A, not too much in chocolate. The tea was, what's that, about 45, 50 milligrams. Not so much. The energy drink was E, so about 75. The coffee, the brewed coffee, 200 milligrams, a lot of caffeine there. The cola bottle, not too much, actually. It's more sugar in cola than caffeine. And then the large soda was the H. Although clearly we don't know what that large soda was. But again, you have a reason for reading. Now, I've given you lots of pre-teaching, pre-reading tasks to do. Last one I want to show you is one to do with vocabulary, because yes, for certain levels, we still need to teach or pre-teach vocabulary that might appear in the text that will be above level. And this is my favorite activity to do with vocabulary, pre-teaching vocabulary. And it's called Words I Know, Words I Think I Know, Words I Don't Know. And actually, I learned this activity from a teacher in Ukraine about 5 years ago, who I sort of sat chatting with at a conference. And the reason I like it so much is because it's all student-led. It's very much student-centered. And it's really simple. So we give students the words, and on their own, individually, they put the words in the boxes that apply to them. So words I know, think I know, don't know. For example, maybe I put the word stimulant in I know. I put the word fatigue in I think I know. And the word to counter in I don't know. Once students have done that by themselves, you put them into groups or into pairs, and they share their words with each other. Because of course, every student is different. They have different knowledge. And so this facilitates some peer teaching aspects. So let's say I put I know, I put stimulant in I know, but my partner put it in I don't know. So I get to peer teach it to him. We both put the word fatigue in I think I know. So we negotiate. We say, well, I think fatigue means this. Oh, really? I think it means this. And then what you could do, if you can't negotiate meaning, you try and find the word, you find the word in the text and try to use the context to help you. And then also, I don't know, I put to counter in there, my partner also put it in, I don't know. We can find it in the text and try to work it out. Or maybe my partner does know and he can tell me what it means. It's all about the learner. And the teacher, of course, during this time is monitoring, seeing which words students are struggling with. So when you come to do feedback on the activity, you only have to focus on the words that have been put in the I don't know section and maybe clarify some of the I think I know. Anything that I know, you don't need to pre-teach. Students already know it. Okay, pre-teaching done. Let's move on to while reading. Loads of stuff to do here. I'm going to take a quick drink. So with the while reading stage, it's essentially, at this point, not necessarily answering comprehension questions. It's just getting students to think as they are reading. And a really nice thing you could get students to do, and I started doing this with my young learners first of all, but then I started using it with teenagers as well. It's called read with your pencil. It's not just reading and letting the information go in one ear, out the other. It's forcing students to reflect on what they have read. So as they're reading, they underline anything they think is important as a first point. Anything that they don't know, or words that they don't know, they circle. So it's active reading here. If they have a question about something, you put a little question mark next to it. So, well, I've just read this, but I've got a question about it. Anything that you find surprising, exclamation mark. And for anything that you already know, you put a smiley face next to it. And essentially what this does, it's basically getting students to read and reflect as they go along, rather than just reading and answering comprehension questions. It's thinking about their reaction to the text. What do they know? What don't they know? Okay. So it's a really nice activity from that perspective. Okay, good. Maya said she liked reading with the pencil since childhood. I mean, it's good practice to do even as an adult. I mean, if I'm researching stuff in books, I'll underline stuff, I'll question mark stuff, I might circle things. It's a good habit, it's a good routine to get into. And what it does, it helps to make reading more visible to the teacher. So I can see how my students are doing, what they understand, what they don't understand. And it can make it more interactive. Of course, Mariam, it's difficult to do while online. You're absolutely right. But certainly on your own, as an interpersonal thing, intrapersonal activity, it works really nicely. But like I say, it makes this whole process visible. I, as a teacher, can see how my students are getting along. Another activity we could do is called Stop, Think, and Discuss. And this essentially is a pair work activity that gets students again to reflect on what they have read within each paragraph. So they read one paragraph and they stop. They then think about some questions. And those questions might vary, but for example, what's the key information in this paragraph? Is there any supporting evidence or examples? What's the purpose of the paragraph? How does it link to the previous one? What do we think might come next? So you read a paragraph, you answer, discuss these questions. Well, you think about it first, then you discuss with a partner. Then you read the next paragraph. You stop, you think, you discuss. So again, it makes that process of reading more interactive, more collaborative, more interactive. And like I say, for me, if it's just a reading lesson and reading a text, they can do that at home by themselves. But if I'm doing it in class, I want to ensure that they are being exposed to good practices, activities that are going to make them more interactive, more collaborative. And then the next thing I'd want to mention is the use of graphic organizers for while reading. So maybe not dissimilar to the previous two while reading activities, but it structures things maybe a little bit more. And they're so good because they help to facilitate critical thinking by helping students to see the ways in which ideas are interconnected with each other. And most graphic organizers are used as tools to think critically about the work of others or to spur critical thinking in the creation of original work as well. They provide the learners different ways of seeing the information. And there are lots of different types of graphic organizers that could be used. Tell me in the chat box. First of all, actually, do you already use graphic organizers? And which ones do you use? Which ones do you like using? And I should also say, I read recently in an article, I was doing some research on classroom differentiation of mixed level students. And they made a very compelling argument that graphic organizers are really, really important to help with differentiation, to help with mixed level classes. Okay, good, Tinatin. I love that, a Vienna diagram. I think you mean a Venn diagram. Yeah, word webs, cause and effect, diagrams, T-charts. Thank you, Maya. I'm not sure about a fishbone, but I can guess what it's like, Natia. An Oreo, oh, I want to know more about an Oreo sandwich, Tinatin. I'm going to write that one down. T-charts, diagrams, okay. Good. So we're already familiar with them. We might already use them. And you know, here's a list of different ones you could use. You know, timelines, which I think is going to be your fishbone, right? We could do a storyboard, T-chart. We had Venn diagrams. We have spidergrams or mind maps. One of my favorite is the Sunshine Organizer because it kind of helps us to answer very specific questions. Yeah, tree, good, Nino. And, you know, of course, not every text is going to match certain, well, each text will match a different type of Venn diagram, a different type of graphic organizer, rather. So you need to think carefully about which ones you're going to use for what text. But all of this is about making learning visible, making reading visible. As Perkins points out, making learning visible is about getting an insight into what and how students understand something. And all of those activities help me as a teacher see or know what my students understand and know. Because thinking and reading is largely an internal process. We're so used to most of it staying out of sight that we don't notice its invisibility. This makes it visible for me, the teacher, and for the students. And those processes, those metacognitive processes, they go through as they are reading. Okay. We're going along quickly here. Good. So that brings us to our after reading activities. And again, I've got lots of ideas to share with you here. And normally in the course book, your after reading activities are your comprehension questions, your true and false, your short answers, your matching ones, whatever it might be. But again, is that necessarily realistic of real life? I'm not convinced. So a lot of these routines are far more collaborative, far more interactive and communicative. So the first one I want to share with you is called the +1 routine. And this is a really nice routine because it helps students to identify key ideas of a text, and it helps them to commit them to memory after being presented with that new information. Because research shows that engaging students in memory work immediately after reading or hearing something helps them to retain that information more effectively. And the scientific term for this is called the retrieval practice. And what it essentially does, it stops students being passive recipients of information and changes them to active processes through retrieval and application. So how does this routine work? Well, step 1 is all about recall. So your students read the text and on their own, they generate a list of key ideas that they can remember from the reading. Now, what's important is that they do this without looking at the text. So you get students to shut their books. What can they remember? How much can they remember? They put it down on a piece of paper. So you give them a minute or two to do that. Step 2 is called the +1 stage, or the add stage. And for this stage, they take the piece of paper and they pass it to the person next to them. And they read what their partner has written, and they add something to that list. Because of course, every student knows different things. They remember different things. Of course they do. So you add a piece of information, you might elaborate on something that they've written. So maybe they've just written one word, but you want to elaborate on it. So you can write more about, this case, the great white shark, maybe. So you can elaborate, you can make a new point, or you can make a connection between ideas. You then pass that piece of paper to the next person, and you repeat that process. So slowly, you are increasing the amount of notes that have been taken. So it's not just my notes and my recall, it's various people in the classes. And when I get my piece of paper back, I've got more information than I had just by myself. And it shows me how maybe I should be, or how students should be recording, or how they should be note-taking. So when they get that piece of paper back, they review it at step 3. What's been added, what's been elaborated on, and then they share their ideas with their immediate neighbor. So at this point, their notes on the text are far more robust, and they can have a more in-depth, detailed discussion. Okay, and it might be that you want to do a rank order task with that information as well. A couple of you asked, will this presentation be available? Yes, it's being recorded. It will be shared with you. Don't worry. Okay, so that's one routine you could do. The next one is just called 3-2-1. And again, this is a pair work, activity, or group work task. Okay. So with this one, we start off with 3 things I found interesting, or 3 things I found surprising or shocking. You can change this as you like. Okay, it is flexible. Maybe it's 3 things that you disagreed with, or 3 words that I learned. It doesn't matter, there's flexibility there. But what's nice about it, it is a personal response. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. It's just what I found interesting. Well, I found this bit really interesting about great white sharks. Oh, yeah, that is quite interesting. But I thought this was the most interesting thing. Then 2 is 2 things I would like to know more about. So I've read this information about the great white shark. Well, actually, I want to know a little bit more about this. Yeah, Rotterdam, it is a bit like an exit ticket, absolutely. And then for this one, I've got 1 thing I would like to fact check. Now, this is important because it gets students thinking critically, and they should not believe everything that they read. Even if it is in a National Geographic learning book and therefore a very reliable source, it's always worth just getting them to fact check something. So it says this about great white sharks, but is that really true? And how am I going to check that? And that's a really important 21st century skill, especially considering where students get a lot of their information from. But like I say, with that, there is flexibility. You can change things around. Maybe it's 3 things I am going to tell my friend about, or 1 thing that I disagreed with, or 1 thing that I don't believe at all. Really simple. So they do that in pairs, in groups, feedback, highly communicative, far more real world, because when we read something in real life, we've just read a book or a magazine or an article in the newspaper, chances are we're going to tell someone about it. Oh, I read this really interesting article today. It was all about this. I found this interesting, etc. Okay. Okay, what other tasks can we do post-reading? A few more for you. I love this one because it's creative as well as showing understanding and comprehension of the text, and simply called Interview the Author. And it works particularly well where something's been written from the first person perspective. And real simple. In pairs, imagine you're going to interview the author of the article or the person in the article. Think of 5 questions that you would like to ask him or her. And like I say, to do this task, they have to have a solid understanding of what the text is about. So essentially, it's a bit like a summary task, but it's taking it beyond that. Again, some critical thinking coming in here, creative thinking, and because they're doing it in pairs, it's collaborative, communicative as well. And once they've written their 5 questions, you get them to switch pairs. Role play your interview with a new partner. So I've got my 5 questions. I'm going to ask you. You're going to pretend to be this astronaut. So how do you sleep? How do you get to the toilet? What food do you eat in space? Whatever it might be. The only restrictions are your students' creativity. And I mentioned there about summarizing, and there's lots of different summarizing tasks that we can, of course, do as well. And summarizing is important because it shows that we have understood what we've read, what we've seen, what we've heard. More so than comprehension questions, because it's more holistic of the whole text. But we also summarize to make connections between what we know already and what we've read, or even within ideas between the text or within the text itself. And also summarizing allows us to practice our higher order thinking skills, analyzing, processing, eliminating. And summarizing tasks can be really flexible. It could be just a spoken activity. It could be a written activity. One thing I like to do is like a summarizing with newspaper editors, where they've got an article that's quite long and they have to reduce it in length to 100 words or 200 words, or even better, turn it into a tweet or a social media post. I mean, summarizing needs to be more speaking than reading. It's 50-50, because to summarize, you have to have read, you have to show understanding of a text and have that high level of comprehension, and therefore to be able to identify key information. So we go back to, so what did you underline as the key information? That's the information that we need to share. What examples are you going to use to support that? So I wouldn't say it's more speaking than reading. I think it's, got equal measures there. You're paraphrasing, you're mediating that information, right? So yeah, think about different ways in which you can summarize. It could be oral, it could be written. Okay, just a couple more activities for you. This is just a really simple thinking routine that you can do at the end of a lesson, end of a reading lesson, end of a unit of work even. I used to think, now I think. It's reflection. It's that I learned section of the KWL chart. What did I learn about, in this case, avoiding the antibiotic apocalypse? And again, it's oral, it's verbalizing what they have learned. Okay, so there's a couple more activities that I want to point out. In regards to National Geographic Learning and Reading, pretty much all of our books come with the audio of the reading. But why is this a good thing? Can anyone tell me in the chat box? Why is having the audio such a useful thing to have of a text? What do you do with it? How can it help? Exactly, Nina, for pronunciation, exactly. So one activity I do, I get my students at the end of the lesson to read through the text and underline any of the words they don't know the pronunciation of. I then play the text and they listen, and they can listen out for those pronunciation of those words. Absolutely. Comprehension of the text is faster, exactly, Anna. So that's the second benefit. When you listen and read, you have to read at the same pace as the narrator, so it can help them with their reading fluency. Okay, so it helps on twofold aspect there. So yeah, intonation as well. Perfect. Yeah, it can help with that, certainly with spelling as well, Sophie, that you being able to see or hear the relationship between sounds and spellings, because we all know that English words don't sound like they spell for the most part, right? And I'm experiencing this firsthand with my little boy at the moment who's learning to read. And he comes out of words, I'm like, what word's that? And he shows it to me. I'm like, okay, I understand why you've said it that way, looking at the letters. So yeah, listening and reading is really effective activity to do. Now, if we want to take that a stage further, we could do a shadow reading task. And this really helps students to explore pronunciation, connected speech, as well as their reading fluency. So how does a shadow reading task work? Very quickly. Step one, students mark the text. So you listen to the text and they mark every time the narrator pauses. So putting things into thought groups, essentially. You then check it as a class. You then listen to the text a second time. And this time they mark any linking or any connected speech that they hear. So mark it on the paper, in the book. You then check as a class and drill any pronunciation as possible. Okay, so for example, sits upon, it's not sits upon, it sits upon connected speech, or sits upon a small. So you can drill that a little bit. They then practice reading the text to themselves, focusing on the pausing and focusing on the linking or the connected speech that they hear or that they've marked. And then as a final activity, they listen and read aloud, or at least sub-vocalize it, along with the audio, keeping pace and with the correct pronunciation. Okay, really effective in giving students confidence in their reading fluency and their pronunciation. And last activity is follow-up to that, because I know time is up. I would do a listen, read, and record activity. So in class, they've listened to it, they've read it, they know how it sounds, they know how it should be read. You then get your students to record themselves reading the text. In other words, being the narrator. Now, they could do this using something like Padlet. They could do it using Vockaroo, or just on their phones. Now, of course, when they do this, is it going to be perfect the first time? No, of course it isn't. Which means they have to do it a second time, a third time, a fourth time, a fifth time. I know this because I do this all the time when I'm recording videos. It takes me multiple attempts, and each time I get better and better and better. So also, the more times I read something, the more I'm increasing my automaticity with the language, improving my pronunciation, my fluency. Yes, it's task repetition, but it's with that added challenge. And once they're happy, they post it on the class Padlet, they send it to you as a sound file from Vockaroo or from their phones. You then have that spoken record of your students' performance. Okay. We've come to the end, and I've given you, I don't know how many activities I've given you today, a lot, I would suggest. But just to sum up, we need to create more engaging reading lessons and in turn, more effective readers by ensuring students bring as much of themselves to the text through pre-reading tasks. Making that whole reading process as interactive, as collaborative, and as visible as possible. And then post-reading, making those tasks more meaningful, more purposeful, not just answering comprehensions in a book, because that is not realistic. We don't do that in real life. Think about the types of discussion activities you can do, the speaking tasks, the reflection, the summaries, the listening tasks that we could also do. Okay. So like I said, lots and lots of ideas and activities for you to take away. So just take some time to reflect very quickly now. Which activities, which ideas are you going to try in your reading classes next week? Let me know in the chat box. Good. 3, 2, 1, recording, interview the author. Thank you, Tina Tim. 3, 2, 1s, jigsaws, word splash, stop, discuss, stop, think, discuss, interview the author, coming up a lot. 3, 2, 1s, 3 Ys, KWLs. Thank you, Maya. Venn diagram, we're using the graphic organizer, interview the author again. Okay, perfect. Anticipation guides coming up a bit as well. Awesome, thank you so much. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time on a Friday evening. It's very much appreciated. I just want to finish by just sharing some information with you. So some more information on the courses we've looked at today. So all of the examples today came from Reading Explorer, Perspectives, and Voices, which are all available from National Geographic Learning through English Book Education in Georgia. You can contact them on the email address there. You have the website. I'm sure you already know that one, their phone number and their address. Okay, now, also I know, I forgot to say at the start about the follow-up emails. So tomorrow, this time tomorrow, you will receive an automated email from Zoom with your certificate. I know how important the certificates are to you. You'll receive that tomorrow in an email. Also in that email, you will receive a link to the recording of this session. So you can watch it back, pause it, take the ideas. It's there to help and support you as much as possible. And there will also be a link to a survey in that email too, which we'd love for you to complete if you have time. Okay, there's a couple of questions about will we receive the materials? I mean, in terms of the PowerPoint, it will be available to you as in the video, okay? As a general rule, we don't share the PDFs or the PowerPoints, I'm afraid. But if you get in contact with me, I'm sure I can do something to help you. I can give you some sort of screenshots maybe, okay? I can put my email in the chat box for you. And unfortunately, there's no time for questions. Are there any other webinars planned? Good question, Nina. That is a question for the team at English Book Education. But certainly, yes, we will be doing more webinars in the future. And hopefully, later in the year, we may even get the chance to come to see you all in person in Georgia. But time will tell, okay? Nene, would you like to finish off by saying any words?
Alex, thank you so much for this interesting webinar. Thank you so much for all of you for attending and for joining us today. So have a good weekend and have a good evening, everybody. Thank you so much.
Perfect, exactly. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Have a lovely weekend and we will hopefully see you soon. Take care, stay safe. Bye for now.